Hi, I'm New World Library social media manager Kim Corbin, and this is my fifth interview in our Coping with the COVID Crisis series, where I'm talking to our authors about tips and tricks and advice and perspective we can all use to help us see our way through these very unusual times that we're living in. We're recording this on May 14th, so we're about 8 weeks in California into sheltering in place. And my guest today is Linda Carroll. She is the author of two New World Library books, Love Cycles, which came out in 2014, and Love Skills, The Keys to Unlocking Lasting Wholehearted Love, which we published on Valentine's Day this year, right before things started going sideways. She has been a therapist and couples counselor for over 3 decades, but she says that her 35-year marriage is really her greatest teacher when it comes to the cycles of love. And I just adore this woman, and I'm so glad that she's here with me today. So thank you, Linda, for being here.
You're so welcome.
One of the things that Linda's doing is that she's offering a free class called Love and Relationships in Quarantine.
Yes.
And it's Saturday, May 23rd. And as part of that, she's come up with a list of 13 tips for couples, which we're going to talk about some of those today. But I know some people are sheltering in place with someone and they're together 24/7. Some people are feeling really lonely and not connected and really feeling their singlehood right now. And so I want to kind of to broaden the conversation to not just talk about couples, but to talk about really the love skills that all of us need in this world that we're living in right now. And the first one that caught my eye, and I've just been thinking about this so much, Linda, is to give space to be different and not wrong if you have opposite ways of managing the news input or managing what's going on.
When in relationships, we usually fall in love with someone that's different than we are. I listen to the news. I get up and I turn on the news, and I care about turning it on to make sure the world is still here, and that somehow it reassures me. And he hates the news, and he reads one newspaper and then he doesn't want to hear about it. So I want to hear it in the evening too. And this is what's happening with people. I think that that's just one example of people that some people want to talk about it, and they're with somebody who only wants to think about positive. And that for people who talk about sort of the scary things, there is often, it's not that they're negative, Kim, it's that there's a release in sort of saying the worst that can happen, and therefore I feel relieved. Often they're with a partner who is like, I don't want to talk about only the positive. Another real trouble is with people who are extroverts and introverts, because that's a real classic kind of pairing. Somebody who's more remote and somebody who wants to attach all the time. And that can work really well when we're in our regular life. But if you're locked in a house with somebody and you're an introvert and they want to process or talk or share the book they're reading or show you the tree outside and you want space alone, it's really hard. Nobody's wrong. And I just am suggesting that if you're living with somebody, that you find a space that's yours. The other thing I'm suggesting is that you get a schedule. If you especially have that dynamic of introvert, extrovert, that there's a schedule that allows for time together where the extrovert knows I can go knock on her door at 3:00, but I won't do that before that. Because otherwise, if we all think that the other person's like us. So I just am going to assume if I'm an extrovert that you're going to want to talk all the time. So it's a way of protecting those differences without making them wrong. So the place where I think where I'm seeing couples that's hard is the social distancing thing going to an extreme. One of the things about how that plays out is somebody who's very cautious and somebody who tends to push the limits. Now that can work if you're not past the point where it's dangerous. But that there are people who, so if somebody who is so cautious that all they see are germs everywhere, and they become almost, almost, I'm trying to think, it's not hysterical, but just sort of obsessed with trying to manage every single piece of paper that comes in the house, that can drive your partner crazy. The other end is somebody who pushes the limits, who goes to concerts, who says, I'm not going to be pushed around. We're fine. This is my oldest friend. We're going to go off and, have a glass of wine together when it's recommended not to. And what I suggest for that is that people get something that's neutral, like the Red Cross, something that is not political or religious, but a neutral CDC, a neutral list of what the recommended ways of caring for yourself are, and make an agreement about following it. But if you're putting the other person in danger, that's another kind of problem.
Yeah, and what about us even beyond coupledom and just like in our world in general on social media right now, and how we're so at odds with each other, it seems, right? And everyone has it's a very divided way of looking at it. We have the anti-maskers who are just going to do whatever they want, and that's how they're choosing to look at it. And then we have those of us who are really trying to do the right thing and follow the guidelines and all of that. And it seems like everyone is not everyone, but there's so much fighting and trying and just lack of kindness and love and compassion and just agreeing to disagree.
Well, I think, but isn't agreeing to disagree different than when you have, I'm a vegan and you're not? That's one thing. But if I'm doing things that are threatening your life and well-being, that's another problem. And I think that a lot of the people I think they're acting out their 14-year-old self, and they're mad and no one's going to tell them what to do. And I think that we always have to have mindfulness about our intention and what we're doing. So if I'm a person who's saying, I'm going to go to a concert and I'm not going to wear a mask in a store. There is no way to give that person information where they're going to say, oh, I'm so glad you pointed out to me that I'm still rebelling against my father. I think it's a question of personal mindfulness, which is, I think it's fine to go to a concert and not wear a mask. But if I am a mindful enough person, I will measure that against what the recommendations are and say, well, this may seem over the top to me, but I'll do it because I'm part of the culture. So I think people who are over that line, Kim, really have other kinds of problems that they're playing out. And you can be sure they play out in other ways in their life, in their work, in their relationship. They're the people that do what they want to do no matter what.
And then how do you deal with the people in your extended social media circles and that kind of thing that are going off the conspiracy theory deep end and really choosing that way of viewing? Do you
I silence. I'm so upset with it, actually, that I'm so upset with what it feels to me like ignorance. It's a real judgment. It's like, I'm so scared about what's going on that I'm going to go to the other extreme. And what I do is I just befriend them in some secret way, because I can't read it because I get too upset about it. And I just think we have, to me, it's almost the same as people that don't believe in science. It is the same. It's like, there is objective information. I tend to believe in science. I tend to believe deeply in science, and I trust science. And so conspiracy theories they feel very young to me too, like fairy tale stuff,
Yeah.
That's a judgment, but that's what I do. It upsets me, so I just close it off.
You protect yourself from it.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah.
I do. I just think it's so much energy going towards something when we don't have that kind of energy to spare. Go make a mask instead of read about conspiracy theory. That's kind of how I respond to it.
Yeah, the way I've been thinking about it is that I have one friend in particular who's very, very strongly in that world. And I am very interested in what she says, because I want to know what the other side is thinking. I'm without getting sucked into it too much. And I just feel like there's so much anger and defensiveness, and that's the energy behind it.
Yeah.
Whereas, like, I can say, you can believe what you want. I'm trying to just have a loving perspective. You can believe what you want, and that's fine. And I can believe what I want. But if you're not delivering what you believe with love and kindness and compassion, you're part of the problem and not part of the solution of what's going on right now. Like, this is America, and people can believe however they want. But what happened to kindness and compassion and love?
I really like that, because I think politically there are some really bad things going on in this country. I don't need a conspiracy theory to acknowledge that some of the political stuff that's happening is crazy enough without taking it to another level of craziness. And some of that is the hatred and vindictiveness.
Yeah, and then it's really easy to fall into judgment and upset around what they're saying. Like that to me feels like the work right now is how do I just let them be and be loving and kind and try to bring that energy into the world right now.
Well, I don't read it. That's how I do it, because I'm not a big enough soul to not have judgment and mean feelings and thoughts. And so I just close it off rather than go down that track. But maybe that's a practice you can do. I can't do
Yeah. Well, we're all doing it our own way, right? Like everyone does it in whatever way they need to take care of themselves, hopefully, if we're being mindful.
Yes, that's right.
Yeah, yeah. And it's reminding me of, you sent out a newsletter early on about your friend and the swan. Do you
Yeah.
tell us that story?
Okay. Okay. I'm going to do, it's a big confessional though.
That's okay.
All right. So I have this
It's okay
friend
with me if it's okay with you.
with me. So I have this friend. Well, I like to think of myself as this person who's into mindfulness and sort of deep thinking. But actually, the thing I love to do, you know what I love most of all, is watching um, Law and Order, Special Victims Unit with Olivia. And I watch that I have watched every single one. I wait for them to come, because here's what happens. There's a bad guy out there, and beautiful Olivia goes, she captures the bad guy, puts the bad guy away, and the movie always ends with justice being served. And so I love her nurturing anyway, but I love, so there it comes. You know, if it was a virus, she would catch it and she'd put it out. So it's like my version of Disneyland. And my husband watches really very, you know, he watches nature films and geographic films and intellectual films. And he says, are you really watching that? And I say, oh no, it's just sort of fun, but it isn't fun. It's for me. It's my self-soothing. Okay. So I have this friend that sends me all these wonderful, or did, I asked her not to stop, these wonderful meditations about swans that are floating along the ponds, and aren't they beautiful and calming you? They don't calm me. They make me anxious. So what calms me is a good cop film where the bad guys get caught. What calms her, if I sent her my Law and Order favorite movies, she would just freak out. What calms her is looking at the tide going in and tiding out. But we have to know what it is that we like to do that makes us feel better, and not push that on another person. And so now you know my secret.
Your guilty pleasure. I love it. And you mentioned self-soothing, and that's one of your tips, is to self-nurture and to remember that it looks different for different people.
Yeah. And that's what I was saying. Like for some people, it's talking about it. And for another, you know, our best friends, it's interesting because both of our husbands don't like to talk about it. And my best friend's husband is in the middle of it. He's a physician and he's in the middle of the whole mess, but he doesn't want to talk about it on his time off, and neither does mine, but we do. So we text all the time and we talk about it. There's some way we find relief with each other in it. How, you know, we're all different, and the ways that we're different, I think some people are eating carrots and they're using this time to do great flush outs of broccoli sticks in the morning, and other ones of us are eating toast and macaroni. It's okay.
Macaroni?
Macaroni and cheese, you know, all the bad stuff, which it isn't bad, but it's not bad. That's really the truth. It's how do we soothe ourselves? This is a time we have to get through. And some of us talk all the time to our friends, and other people are feeling like they don't want to talk to anyone. They're just doing the things that help them calm down. And that's not engaging. And we're back to the introvert extrovert. Self-soothing and knowing how to do it in ways that are helpful, not ways that are harmful. I mean, some people soothe with alcohol and drugs in ways that are really hurting them. That's not what I'm talking about. Nor I'm not talking about gaining 100 pounds, but I'm just saying that not being so rigid in our idea about what it is that calms me down and what it is that calms you down, and making a lot of space for that.
And having compassion and self-love for yourself, and to have a little more leeway during this time.
That's, you know, I have this women's group I'm doing online. I have two of them actually. And we were doing something on self-compassion, and we left it yesterday with, I was asking the women to talk about different ways they soothe themselves psychologically, spiritually, physically, and emotionally. And they had ways that were so different. I couldn't keep up with the list, but the variation was this wide. You know, one person couldn't get up, she couldn't hike far enough on the weekends. And for the another person who followed her said, I just stay in bed all weekend reading a book. I mean, people soothing ourselves in ways that we can honor is so important, to know it and to follow it up and to give our friends a break if they're not the same.
Yeah. Yeah. Compassion for ourselves and our friends, for every all around. And another one of your tips is to let them feel bad or okay about the current crisis.
Yeah, that's right. Because for some people, you know, we feel those stories, really take them in and have a lot of sadness around them. And for other people, they don't want to hear the stories. And they like to, and they're able, not like to, that's the wrong word, but they manage by feeling separate. And I had this one couple who were in a really big argument about it that I was working with about this issue. And it was the woman who kept saying to her partner, who was a man, why don't you talk about this? Why don't you talk about this? I can't believe it. And he said, it's just life. He kept saying this, it's just life. And she pushed him and pushed him. And finally he started to cry this was on a Zoom talk. And he said, I can't bear to go out there every day if I feel those things. He was working out in the world of people and in a very necessary occupation. He said, I can't do it. And he just broke down. And when she saw that, it was like she felt so badly that she had judged him. But that was how he held himself together, because actually he was pretty fragile on the inside. It's
Uh,
like an EMT person isn't going to the scene of an accident. And if they sit there and their heart is full of only compassion for the people who are hurt, they can't do what needs to be done.
Absolutely. That reminds me of my friend Anne, who's a nurse also, who is very similar. You know, like I'll say, well, I don't understand the accuracy of the tests or this or that. And she's like, don't talk to me. You know, like she's so in it that she has to just stay focused on what's in front of her.
That's
Like
right.
that she can't go much farther beyond that. And I really heard her when she said that, like,
Yes.
oh,
Yeah.
got it.
That was really touching to me when I had that experience with them, because I was even judging him, like, why is he's so buttoned up? But that's why he could do the job. And underneath that was such a fragile soul.
Yeah. 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 Often if that's the case. So a lot of your tips, and we aren't going to be able to go into all of them today, are pretty self-explanatory, but there's one that I'm really curious about because I'm not sure exactly what you mean. And that is to take advice from a POW camp.
I have a dear friend named Phyllis Pilgrim. It's really her name. She's a yoga instructor for 40 years at Rancho La Puerta in Mexico, which is a destination health spa I work at. And she was raised in a concentration camp in Indonesia. It was a prisoner of war camp, not a concentration camp, from the ages of 3 to 7. And she was there with her father, who was working for a Dutch industry, and they were arrested. And it was brutal. She has a book out on it. And and whenever she's asked how she survived, she says her mother taught her every day to think something beautiful, to say something beautiful, and to do something beautiful. And this was in a place where there were no resources. And she remembers one day looking all day for a flower that grew in the crack, and and brought it to her mother, and she said, this is the beautiful thing I saw. And I just never forgot that, because there's always a way to think something beautiful, to see something beautiful, and to do something beautiful. So I love that.
I love that too. And that goes back to what I was saying before about no matter what you believe, bring more kindness and beauty and love to this world.
That's right.
Yeah. Oh, I love that so much. And it also reminds me of Viktor Frankl's book, Man's Search for
Yeah,
Meaning.
it does. Comes right out of that, doesn't it? No matter
Yeah.
how bad it is, we can always find some meaning in it.
Yes. And focus on the positive. Okay. Well, for my last question, I'm just curious if you have any parting words of wisdom or perspective or advice or encouragement for people who might be going through a challenging time right now and feeling like, I know I've been feeling the weight this week of where we're at, like I was
I
kind of enjoying it and it's like, whoa, like we're in the maybe middle of phase 1, like there's no immediate end in sight here in California.
Yeah.
So what would you say to people who are kind of really feeling the weight of things right now?
Well, I know the people that come to New World are interested in mindfulness, and it's just like wholehearted love. I would love if I could have a glass of orange juice and get mindful. But the truth is, just like love is a feeling and mindfulness is a concept, and if you want to turn the feeling into something real, you need skill. And with mindfulness, if you truly want to become a mindful person, you've got to practice. And this is a practice camp. Everything we're doing is a practice to become mindful. It's easy to be mindful when you're on the top of the mountain or you're looking out at the ocean and you can just feel, just like when you're in the first stage of love, you can feel all those feelings. But to actually keep those mindfulness, that mindful, expansive view of the world in the middle of a pandemic, that's where you really get your black belt of mindfulness. So this is a great opportunity, and it sometimes feels really hard. It's
Yeah.
not all wonderful, and it's okay when it feels hard and you forgive yourself and you get up the next morning and you work another day at mindful practice. And so that's what I tell myself every day, and that's what I'll leave you with.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Linda, for taking the time to connect with me today.
You're welcome. I'm so glad to be here and to see you, Kim.
Yay.